Welcome to the Deeper Podcast. My name is Mo. Before we get started on this podcast, you need to know that we had some technical difficulties and this camera was acting very bad. And so for the first 20 minutes of this podcast, you're probably just going to see a picture of me. All the other cameras work. All the audio is fine. But if you can hold on for the first 15 to 20 minutes, it'll catch back up and we'll be back in business. So appreciate your patience. Technical difficulties make this thing fun. But all the podcast is there and it's just fine on audio as well. Thanks for your patience.
Welcome to the Conduit Deeper Podcast, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the details that surround our current sermon series, from current events to fascinating finds to conversations that take us deeper into the Word. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the Deeper Podcast. My name is Mo, executive pastor at Conduit Church, joined with our lead pastor, Darren Tyler, on what is election week 2024. But the election's over, and the results are in.
I was going to say election day is over.
Election day is over, and the results are in.
Yeah. And I guess this episode could be titled How Creed Saved America.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We'll get there.
We'll get there, yeah. Like this. So there's your spoiler. How did Creed save America? And if that's not enough alone to get you to hit the like button and the subscribe button, then you need to just turn this off and find a different podcast, because we're about to tell you how Creed saved America.
Amazing.
And not the Apollo one.
No one saw that coming in this intro for this podcast.
Yeah.
They were wanting to listen to maybe get, let's get Mo and Darren's opinion on the election.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that was going to be a nugget.
Yeah. With arms wide open. So get your podcast wide open, because get ready for the ride.
Oh my word.
And by the way, when I say that the election is still ongoing, our friend Sam Brown, who we hosted a fundraiser for in our church,
yes,
they're still counting votes in Nevada. It's like someone's out there like counting toothpicks.
Depending on who you watch, they've already called it for the presidential.
Yeah. So we can say that.
But they're still dealing with the Senate and House seats.
Yeah.
A couple of Senate and House seats.
Which matters immensely, because if the House turns Democrat, we're going to spend the next 4 years with another 4 years of impeachment threats and hearings
But it's looking like it will not be that.
That's correct. Yeah, I think as of whatever day this is, completely lost track of time, Thursday
the 7th of November.
That the House and the Senate looks like is red, which will give him the power to do the thing that I loved the most about his first presidency. And there's plenty to not like, but I know I keep ranting about the COVID vaccines and he's shutting down America. Anyway, yada yada. We all know Darren's opinion there, but what I liked about what Trump did was he did what he said he was going to do, and then everybody was like, oh my God, I can't believe he put the embassy, the American embassy in Jerusalem. Well, he said he was going to do it.
Yeah. So
the thing that I appreciated about it was, if anybody was surprised that he did it, you shouldn't have been, because he said he was going to. And I think it was yesterday he issues a statement that he's about to write some executive orders. He just completely destroying all these DEI things in the military or across the government. There's male, there's female, like the things that we have been talking about. He is policies. He's doing what he said he would do, which most politicians, and I've been alive and I've been an election, political junkie for however long. Bush, I want to say Clinton. I don't remember if it was Clinton, so fact check me. Multiple presidents, for instance, it's just on the front of my mind, was Israel, but said we're going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. None of them did it. He did. He said he was going to do it, and he did it. So this is the moment where we get to see, will he continue to say, hey, I'm going to put Robert F. Kennedy in charge of just dismantling these healthcare things, happening within our country?
Yes.
Will he do it? Now, the answer is I bet he will.
Oh, yeah. It's already, I mean, all those things are starting to move already. Just to back up just a little bit.
I'm sorry, I got way ahead.
No, we're good.
We're about to start singing Creed songs.
Just going to just give an overview. Again, it looks like 312 electoral votes in total.
Yeah.
All 7 swing states. 7 for 7.
Virginia wasn't considered a swing state.
No, but it was close. He almost flipped it.
Yeah.
Almost flipped it.
Yeah.
But DC's too strong there. for that to happen. Currently.
Yeah. I was watching the closest thing in the Progressive Party they have to an alpha male is Chris Cuomo, which I don't might be the steroids or the New York, I don't know. But his take on it was, and I'm sure there are others out there with the same take too, was that the bigger story is that, it is red and whatever, but is in all the blue states, all the blue cities, that he gained ground in every single one of those places. Like they were going through New York, boroughs like Queens, and they're gobsmacked at this. And if you're a Democratic politician or, consultant, okay, so California, for instance.
Yes, yeah, I just was looking at it this morning. He hit 40% of California, which is
40%. Which I thought 40% of the conservatives moved here. So think about, you know what I mean? Like how many of I would love to see the stats on how much more he picked up in Tennessee, but the anecdotal number, which is at least tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of Californians that moved out of there that would have all voted for him are gone, and he still went to 40% in California.
Yeah, apparently flipped San Bernardino, Orange County, Riverside, Fresno, Merced, San Joaquin, Nevada County, and Butte County in California were all blue in 2020.
Wow.
Those are all red this time around. And no county in California flipped red to blue. So, there's just a pendulum swing, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Roughly 141 million votes across the country. And it was he won the popular vote by 3.3%.
How many millions does that translate into? 3.3%. Is it 5 million?
Yes, 5 million. 5 million more votes. It's large. It's large.
It's why, when you're watching election night, the talking heads on some of the best television ever for me, and this is a very shallow place in my heart where this comes from, is watching hardcore progressives that I know hate everything about us just get the smug slapped off their face. But watching them towards the middle, beginning, later in the evening, they were still talking about we need to get rid of this Electoral College. It's a remnant of slavery. Shane Claiborne, one of my least favorite liberals, because he's claims to be a Christian and liberal, was talking about the Electoral College is the remnants of slavery. It's a racist. I noticed by the next day, none of them were talking about that anymore because we won the popular vote on it. So, we can't. That didn't help us either.
Right.
But the watching them ring these numbers again, News Nation, I think, even called it before Fox News did.
Yeah, they did. Because
it was that obvious. But CNN, NBC, even when he accepted, the headlines the next morning were, the race hasn't been called yet, but he's, accepted victory. And what's lost in that headline is called by who?
Right. Exactly.
And the answer was called by the New York Times, called by the Washington Post. And it's one more reason for them to somehow at some point look in the mirror and say, oh, nobody's listening to us anymore. We weren't waiting for you to call it. It's not your job. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the New York Times gets to be the one to call the election. Nobody said,
Did you wait up?
I sure tried.
It was late. It was a long night.
I know. And normally, me, normally I would have, but I'm getting old. I made it to 11:30.
Not bad.
Now, keep it. I didn't get up, go to bed. I literally fell asleep on the couch.
Sure.
And I sort of nodding off because they were at that point. Atlanta was still saying it's going to be 2 or 3 in the morning. I was expecting it to be like it was in 2020, where I forget. It was a week. I think it was Thursday or Friday after the election before Georgia finally got their votes counted. And so I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going to get my 2016 moment here where I get to watch, the CNN people crying, on the air. So I just fell asleep. I couldn't make myself. And then I woke up at 2 a.m. wide awake to a text from you, Trump 47. And then I was up till 6 a.m. I was up just, joy scrolling,
Yeah, Georgia flipped first, and then And then once PA finally went, which all the signs were pointing that direction all night long, but it was just everybody was waiting for the ball to drop. Like, is this actually happening? Is this really happening? And as he just kept increasing his lead in PA, and once they finally called Pennsylvania, everybody knew it was over from there.
Yeah.
And then for him to continue to win the rest after that was like, oh my goodness, this is legit.
Well, it was remarkable.
Yeah.
And clearly, you know, in the aftermath of this, the Harris campaign knew it was going bad. The people that were there for the celebration, they were already bailing by. I think there's a Washington Journal article about, like, word had spread.
Yeah.
Which is what makes it remarkable that the talking heads on CNN.
It's like, are they doing that for ratings? They're trying to pay the bills, extra, rotation of commercials. Like, it almost feels like part of the reason they do that is just to
keep you hanging on.
Keep you hanging. It's viewers, it's eyeballs, they're paying the bills. They're paying the bills. That's what it feels like. Compared to what I was watching, which was, a couple of live streams, like, Charlie Kirk and his panel and his team were given real-time data and information without commercials. It's just, it's alternative press.
Yeah.
They're not making money off commercials.
And maybe we can, I still say alternative press too, because it's, when we say it, we all know what we mean by it.
Versus mainstream media.
But I wonder if there's a new language we need to adopt. Of course, now that sounds like a liberal. We got to have a new word for this. But the fact that they're calling themselves mainstream, I would call them mainstream, is giving them so much credit they don't deserve.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. The mainstream media moniker doesn't really hold water anymore. Mainstream is now off network.
Yeah, I mean, look, Joe Rogan ratings on one podcast compared to CNN ratings, where he could fart their ratings. Like, it just wouldn't even, like, it's just a wisp of what he's getting. And it's my understanding from people that have been on his show is he has as much crew as we have. He's
Sure.
got a guy.
Nimble.
You walk into a corporate news room and it looks like they're trying to launch a satellite.
Right.
Like, what are all these people doing?
1,000 TVs,
Yeah.
hundreds of staff, writers.
Yeah, hair and makeup. You got the producers, the line people, there's and all that work for a fraction of what a Rogan or heck, Theo Vaughn, for crying out loud, is getting.
Many of them.
With just him in like a garage, as far as I know. I mean, I know that our friend Sean Ryan is building an actual studio, professional. But the first time I went to Sean's studio, keep in mind, this guy's getting better ratings than ABC. As far as ratings, meaning people listening. And it was like this studio that it wasn't even a nice part of Franklin. Just an old, unassuming strip mall.
A warehouse.
You know what? Exactly right. It's a warehouse that he'd built out his studio, and an upstairs of the warehouse, very Spartan. And it's like him and a guy, and that's his whole crew. But that has become mainstream. Like, and maybe that's what we should talk about, right? It's probably what we are talking about, is that the reason these guys are getting the ratings they're getting is they're asking the questions that everybody's already asking. They're talking to the needs that the people already have. And so, for instance, I know we're not supposed to talk about white males because that's what the corporate media has told us for all this, is that the white males are. So basically, they've chased all the white males out of the party and are now shocked, except for obviously the few that wear tampons or whatever. But the guys they've chased them all out of the party. They've chased and shamed young white men for a decade, and then they're gobsmacked that those guys are not, that they're not in their party anymore. And they're on places like podcasts, like Twitter, like, people, I've shared this story, but my son was the first guy that ever introduced me to Jordan Peterson like 10 years ago, or not even, whatever it was. He was like 13 or 14. He sent me a YouTube video, this guy owning a liberal, at 14. Like, how did he even know that, But he's not watching any of that nonsense.
I stayed up to watch Trump do his speech.
Now, listen, did you stay up because you knew it was going to be called? Because I'd given up hope. Or were you or were you just so engaged?
No. I stayed up. I'm such a data dork. Like, stats and data and information, just, I don't know, something about it. It's just my wheelhouse. And so I'm studying it, reading it, watching it, and just, I'm seeing it happen. And so I knew they were going to call it soon. And so once they did, I'm like, okay, well, now he's going to give a speech. And then they announced he's going to give a speech. So I'm like, I want to hear what he's got to say. And, there's a ton of excitement. So I stayed up till 2 a.m. to hear him speak. And then as he's speaking, obviously he's introducing some of the people on his team, which was pretty cool. I mean, he didn't have to do that. But when he introduced JD Vance, his VP, I have to admit, I was a little teary-eyed. Like, I got a little emotional. It came out of nowhere. I didn't see it coming. It might have been because I was so tired. But knowing that JD is from a hole-in-the-wall, middle of nowhere town in southwest Ohio, where my family is from, it was something about just the representation of a guy like that who comes from a very poor part of Ohio, graduated from the same high school as family members that I have. To see him up there, knowing that he's in the White House with the ability to make decisions and policy, representing me and my family, something about that just hit right and restored some faith into the system and what could be.
If you have not read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, a friend of mine recommended it when it first came out, which I'm guessing was 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know now.
Yeah, it was about 9 years ago.
And it's somebody that this is a guy that I know that when he doesn't recommend books a lot, but when he recommends one, I always read it. And he's 100%. I always love it. I didn't know who JD Vance was. I'd never heard of him before. But I remember telling you about it because I'm like, Mo, this is like your hometown. Like, this guy's like, he's talking about his love for family and where it comes from. And he traces it all the way back to the Appalachian Mountains and then traces that even further back to the Scottish Irish, the clans, William Wallace. It was the most fascinating, but also then on the ground level of what was going on in his community growing up. And I guess I resonate with it because I'm a white trash version of that, Of course. But that was your people.
Yeah, and seeing him up there, and he's an Ohio State Buckeye, so that's always cool.
Yeah, nobody cares.
And he's he was talking about his Bengals the other day, which is great.
Again, nobody cares.
But
I shouldn't say that. We probably got a solid 8% of our listeners are probably Ohio people, so right? I should
It was just cool. It was just cool. And then since then, all the stats are out, right? Who voted and how they voted. And one of the biggest numbers that's being represented here is the fact that the largest percentage of Republican voters was 59% men, 45 to 64. Generation X is what held this together, what pushed it over the edge.
Those are my people.
Yeah.
The Gen Xers.
Yeah, I come in right under there by a couple of years, but 45 to 64, that generation, that's your people. That's who you graduated high school with, right?
Yeah. And if you were to look on my social media feed, you would see a lot of those guys out there. And I think it hits deep for us because nobody that I know that voted for Trump matches what we were being called by the Harris campaign. Or Biden, the entire left-wing progressive. The guys that I know in my world, and I would put me in my own category, we work hard for our families. We're still married to our same spouse because we work. Our parents didn't coddle us at all.
Right.
Almost everybody that I know in the hometown I grew up in, we were all working jobs by the time we were 14, 15 years old. Yeah. And so and by the way, we're all parents, and we're all parents of daughters in that mix. And, even though some of our daughters wouldn't necessarily vote the way that we vote, we want them to be able to go into a bathroom without being sexually assaulted by a man who thinks he's a woman. We do not want a man who is in a competitive sport beating the absolute crap out of women and getting a gold medal for it. And the whole world just acts like it didn't happen.
Yeah, as if it's even debatable.
Yeah. So when I see these guys, these beta males talking about they want, their daughters to have the ability to kill their grandbabies, the Gen X in me wants to take them behind the woodshed and just beat the absolute crap out of them. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I have no wheelhouse for that. That's, and maybe they're the ones that should be fighting in the Olympics and let some woman beat the absolute crap out of them because the beta male in them is like just
right, exactly.
Like you're folding like a napkin. So anyway, and we're like, I've been listening to podcasts since long before they were known, and a lot of the Gen X people I know were as well.
Well, I mean, Joe Rogan falls into that category.
Yeah, that's right.
Elon Musk falls into that category.
Yeah.
I mean, you go down the line of who falls in that category and who had a pretty large voice.
Yeah.
Into it. How old is RFK Jr.?
He would be 70.
Oh, he's or
67. You'd never know it because the guy could do way more pull-ups than I could do.
That's the guy you want in charge of your Health and Human Services Department.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
The current person is I don't even know how to say it right.
It's a man.
It's a man.
It's a mentally deranged, mentally troubled man who thinks he's a woman.
Yeah.
Can I say? Look, once again, I'm feeling like a liberal. I want to change a word. I've become tired of using the word trans even because it's not a thing.
Right.
Like it's a category that describes something, but there is no such thing as a man transitioning into a woman. Now, there's a man dressing like a woman. There's a man cutting his off. Mm-hmm. There's women who have cut off their breasts, but they're not transitioning. They're cosplaying. It's like this is a mental disorder that. But anyway, I'm not going to go down the semantics route with the euphemisms, but it just makes me angry, and I'm getting angrier apparently. So.
Yeah, the largest voting demographic for the Democrats was women 18 to 29 in an overwhelming margin. 63% was the largest voting demographic for Democrats.
Wow. And I saw a stat yesterday, and if anybody's listening, you want to listen, find it and send it to me because I couldn't find it this morning, but it was a percentage of those. So how many was that percentage?
63% of women 18 to 29.
And in that group of females, the percentage of them that were single versus married was
majority,
like a pretty large majority. I want to say 60%. I'll be safe and say 60%. It might have been higher. Now, in fairness, that might just simply be because in that category of female, if you're a hardcore progressive, you hate the whole trad wife thing. You hate the traditional values. So progressive females are waiting a lot longer to get married and either not having children or waiting to have children. So it could just be that alone. It might have nothing to do with married versus single and just everything to do with their political ideology. But females who, which is, that's what they double down on. They saw that in their polling in the Harris campaign, that for them, abortion was the main issue. And so they doubled down on abortion. And in doing so, absolutely missed the mark because they forgot that there were a lot of men out there still voting, and they forgot that there are a lot of women. I mean, it is a misnomer to say that all women want the right to abort their children. There's a large percentage of women who do not want their children to be aborted or their grandbabies.
They're still breaking down all the statistics right at this point. Kind of next up is, kind of in the queue is, Trump's team figuring out who's going to be on the cabinet. And he kind of shared a little bit about this on his his Rogan interview about how he, it's really about him selecting 100 top positions that end up being around 10,000 spots in the entire White House. Did you see that part of the interview?
No, say it.
He was talking about, Joe was just asking him, like, how does this work? Or once you're in the White House, where do you start? Mm-hmm. And he was just explaining, like the biggest part of the job in the beginning is getting roughly your 100 top level positions filled, of which matriculate down to around 10,000 spots across government. And so he's like, I can't I'm not handpicking all 10,000 people. I'm picking my top people and then go from there.
Trusting them, yeah.
Trusting them, of course, just like any other corporation or industry. But, so he's going through the job right now with his team to find those top 100 and then more specifically cabinet, the top cabinet. And so there's some of the biggest ones are, Attorney General, Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. Those are some big ones that are going to obviously, be on the front lines of how we're talking to other nations, how we're handling the lawfare in this country.
Yeah.
Have you heard some names, or do you have names of which you hope are a part of this team?
I have not heard his name specifically as it relates to Secretary of Defense, or have you heard them yet?
Secretary of Defense,
or Attorney General, or
I've heard Burgum's name being tossed around. I've heard Kash Patel for Attorney General, which I think is a slam dunk.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
If you don't know much about Kash,
I would love to see that.
Kash with a K. I would love to see that. Obviously, RFK would bring in a whole new regime for the CDC and the FDA. I mean, you talk about a absolute tsunami of change. That is going to be interesting to watch.
I mean, leading an organization like Conduit, we got 32, whatever, on staff. And think how careful we are, right, to hire slow. And thankfully, because we do that, we've got a team that is, I'd put up against any team in town. But imagine, I walk into, let's say, I don't know, a mega church in Texas that is nobody on staff, and I have a month to hire. Not only just and it's not like these are like Matchbox cars. Okay, I'll put this one here, put this one here. These are people, so you have to not only get the right one, they have to say yes to it. You got a salary, all that.
Yeah, they change their lives. For it.
And I did hear him talk about how hard it was, and it was one of the things he was unprepared for. And the mistakes he made. Of course, Kamala she couldn't remember a single mistake she made or anything she'd do different. But what he said I would do different is there were just people that I put in place that I didn't know, I didn't trust, and they were bad people. And now that said, the thing that makes him a strong leader is when it's a bad person, he'd just fire him.
Sure. Yeah.
Which of course that was the mainstream media. This is the decorum. He's unpresidential. He's firing people. But of course, if you've got the wrong person, that's just leadership 101. If in our world, if we have somebody on staff who's actively working against us, and I don't fire them, that's my fault then. And not only that you leave that person in place, but the people that they're harming around them, it's my fault. It's not the person even anymore who's causing the problem. It's my fault because I didn't deal with that person. It all goes back to me. As a leader and as a president, I actually, I remember thinking, God, you just walk in and, say something wrong, you get fired. But that's not the way it was happening at all. He just had people that were working against him, Mattis, whatever. These are good men probably, but and he'd just fire them. So I'm hopefully this time around, first of all, he's had 4 years to think about it. And there's been 4 years where it's suddenly become less politically dangerous to be associated with him.
Right. That's true too.
I
mean, especially when you have people like Tulsi Gabbard, jumping sides per se.
Yeah.
She's going to have a role somewhere, of course. Vivek is going to be. I would love to see him as the press secretary. I don't think we'll get it, but he's so quick.
Yeah, he's so quick. It definitely would not be a promotion for him, right? It would be a demotion, but
The Jennings. What's the one guy that's on CNN?
Scott Jennings.
Scott Jennings is being. There's a lot of people talking about him.
Yeah,
stepping in. He is sharp.
Yeah. So did you? I actually am embarrassed to say I didn't know who he was before just the last month or so.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Because I haven't watched CNN, so I don't watch it for news ever, but for entertainment, it was So it was a whole different reason to watch it during the election cycle. Yeah. And I'm seeing this guy pop up that's like one of the most reasonable people I've ever heard in that world. You know, and in some ways I'm even convicted, you know, because he's talking to his hosts who are hardcore progressives, saying, "Look, I know we disagree on this, but you're my friend, and you're, you know,
so well done."
You know, and in a weird way, it gives me a little bit of hope for CNN because they didn't immediately fire the guy who completely contradicts almost everything they say and does it so eloquently that that you can hardly argue with his facts on it. So I would love to see him because that job. I mean, what is that girl whose name I can't remember her name that's in there right now? John Pierre, Claude Van Damme, whatever her name is. I mean, she's the worst.
I thought Psaki was bad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, but at least Psaki could like form a sentence, and when she closed her eyes, it didn't look like they were still open because of all the eye makeup. But it's a hard job. I mean, I remember, was her name McEnany?
Kayleigh McEnany.
That was entertaining.
She's great.
Like I wouldn't fight her for nothing, but her command of the facts and the details. But the reason it's a terrible job is you're being asked a question to answer on behalf of the President of the United States, policies, whatever. And you misspeak, they're going to crucify you. You misspeak, you're going to go back to your office and get your rear end chewed out. You know, it's a terrible job. Now, I think the good news is for Pierre, who's in there right now, is I don't think Biden's been asleep for the past 2 months, so she can't
really
get
answering to anybody.
Yeah, she can't. Yeah, there's nobody to yell at her anymore.
He's supposed to be giving a speech today, actually, like right now. I believe he's supposed to be addressing the nation.
Well, it's probably took 2 days to get him up and running.
Yeah, and it's about noon DC time right now, roughly. So it's the height of the day for him.
So that's interesting. So thinking this through, one of the things that I've seen as far as the Democratic side trying to figure out what went wrong, I have noticed a growing chorus of voices that are angry at the Biden, cabinet and Biden himself for putting them in this position because he's going to run it because he ignored it. So they're not mad at Harris. And it's one of those moments where I just want to talk to one of them and say, she was there. She was in the middle of it. She lied too. She covered for him too. So how is it possible that you're mad at him and not mad at her? She was part of the cover-up.
Yeah, it's like they forget she was the vice president.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I would say maddening, but it's like she covered for him. And one of the questions that she never answered was, did you know? And why didn't you say anything? In the handful of interviews that she actually submitted to, when those questions were asked, she didn't have an answer. And look, I get that they're friends. I get that they're close. Like when they're not on TV, these are people that work together. Their families probably vacation together. So it's hard to answer that question. But you're not fit to be president if you're not willing to tell me why you didn't say this sooner. Like Biden should have not ran at all. Like that you go all the way back. They let a guy, and I say this I try to put some empathy in it, to put some human form on it. This is a senior citizen. I will say again, they keep making it about age. It's not age. I just watched 93-year-old Don Finto pray, with the most eloquent, Ernie, Smith in our church family, 83 years old, still sharp as a tack mentally. This is not about age, it's mental cognitiveness. And that can happen in your 60s, your 70s, your 90s, whatever. That's the problem. So you've got a man who's in mental decline and nobody, including his wife, willing to take away the keys to the car because you can't drive anymore, Grandpa, because you're mentally you can't do it anymore. And she was in the middle of that and didn't. So that's the one thing that is frustrating to me about it. But I'll say this: we should be celebrating because I think God gave us mercy. Because the one other theme that I'm seeing that it should give us all chills, whether it's The View or CNN pundits, Anderson Cooper, Scarborough, they're blaming it on misinformation. Jimmy Kimmel, right, the clip that's going viral right now, him crying, saying that you voted for him, it was a bad night for all of America, even if you voted for him, it was a bad night, you just don't know it yet. In other words, saying that we're dumb and we were fooled. But here's the point. What I'm getting at is what they believe the solution is it was disinformation. We believe the lies, and so we're going to have to deal with disinformation. So in 4 years, in 2 years, Congress, that ought to be on the front of everybody's mind, that their solution for this is to shut down, to hold accountable, whatever language they're using, social media platforms for disinformation. Never mind that their own disinformation didn't work, right? They're saying out loud that Trump wanted to assassinate Liz Cheney. Completely untrue. That went all over viral on social media. They're not talking about that as disinformation. So that didn't work, number one. So they're not even right. Even if it was disinformation, they're right. Disinformation is out there, and it's their disinformation. It didn't swing the election for them. And then the second thing is the solution is not, cannot, must not be that they get to silence our voices in the town hall, and the modern town hall is social media. Micah said it, before we started. I can't remember if we said after we started recording, but thank God for a weird dude like Elon Musk. I don't know what spectrum he's even on, but he's on one of them. Bought Twitter at an amount of money that was completely ludicrous because he saw that we needed to. You've got to save the ability to speak freely. Without him, and there are untrue things. I see it all the time. I see Christians sharing things that are not true. But it doesn't mean that we got to shut everything down. They can't say it anymore. That's a road we do not want to go down. It is not a road that, because when it's called disinformation, somebody has to decide what is true, what is not true. And that doesn't end well, ever, in history or present or future.
Do you think Trump will be the 48th president?
Of course not.
Oh. Is this contraire?
Is this what the Democratic...
No, this is what I mean. Is there a chance in the next 2 months that JoJo goes to sleep or goes away, or they have to medically remove him? Kamala is president for 45 days, however long, just so that they can say that she was the president.
For 5 minutes?
To be the 47th president.
Is anybody credibly saying that, or is that just a fun thing you're like...
It's a fun thing that's floating around on the internet. They're like, what if they tried to pull that off just to stick it to him?
Stick it to him.
Yeah, just so that she can say that she was president.
Now, let's say, okay, so no, I don't think that's going to happen. Right, we all think that's silly. The other side, though, is he's not well.
I know.
We were talking about it. I think we talked about it the last podcast. But his garbage comment got so much attention. But I couldn't get past the fact that, oh my gosh, he looks infinitely worse than he did the last time he was in public. Like infinitely less cognitive.
Can him and Jill make it to the inauguration? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
because there has to be this transfer of power where everybody's present for the event. It's all ceremonial, I understand, but is he well enough to be able to do that, or do they have to, step in and have Kamala be the
47th president?
Wouldn't that be wild?
Dude, it would be wild. And again, God knows I don't mean this, but if he passed away,
right,
that would be a remarkable part of history. And I got to tell you, it would be a pretty hollow victory if you're Kamala to be the first Black female president
for 30 days.
For 30 days, like, you can't even get your pencils made. You can't have your presidential seal figured out by then.
Yeah.
You have to figure out the whole office. Get it decorated, and then and then have to hand it into her. I will say that on that day, on Inauguration Day, I'm curious to see how, because I've not been alive yet where the actual president wasn't the incumbent running against him. So Biden will still be there at the inauguration, handing over,
right?
For
all intents and purposes.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so he'll be there.
I want to go back to something that we talked about just a second ago, because this dovetails into Sunday's teaching from last week. We started a new series, and it's something that Scott Jennings said actually on CNN when he was reviewing all the data and the clear victory that not only the Republicans had, but obviously Trump, is that this is a mandate, that the American people have spoken. There's a mandate at this point of a desire for a cultural shift. in the way he said it, in the way he framed it, it was so dead on. I mean, absolutely resonate with it. And, as these stats are coming out, it's showing that, like we mentioned, Gen X men absolutely showed out for the election and helped push this across the line. And it ties into what you talked about Sunday about biblical masculinity and leading our families, leading our communities, leading our nation. And that played out in a way this week, very specifically. Maybe just give a little bit of overview for those maybe catching up that weren't here Sunday or haven't heard Sunday's teaching, kind of what you softballed out there.
Yeah, I mean, what I think I softballed and hardballed, right, was
both.
That there's been a war on masculinity, at least for the last 10 years. And I think it's been more because it sort of mirrors the rise of Jordan Peterson, and nobody could figure out, I couldn't figure out at the beginning, like, why is this Canadian who uses words that I feel like I've got to Google every other word, why is he rising up in it? And then, of course, and actually the funny thing, the first realization for me was when I started seeing like Vox and Mother Jones and writing pieces about his harmful rhetoric, problematic. Whenever you see the word problematic from a liberal, you know that, I just completely disagree with it, so it's problematic. But it was, why are all these white males? He's a racist because all these young white males are into Jordan Peterson. And he was tapping into this war on masculinity, that every trait of a man that we have, that we were born with, and it's seeped into the Christian world now. You see, there are people out there like Sheila Ray Gregor saying that Wild at Heart is a harmful book. It's problematic.
Wow.
And the problem is it's not problematic. All Wild at Heart was this is what a man is. We're born for adventure. We're born to rescue. We're born for that. And so in a fight for the family, it has to start with a man who understands what biblical masculinity is, not toxic, not by the way, not even bro masculinity, but it's biblically based masculinity. So that's what we talked about on Sunday.
There's an article that was a Twitter thread that was put together by a gentleman named Paul, if I can pronounce his last name, Antleiter. Put together this. He studies culture. He studies from a Christian perspective, kind of what's happening in our country, and he listed out some observations as to the shift in American culture over the past few years, and is really good. And one of the things that he identifies several things here that speak to the shift in the culture to what you're discussing here. One of the first top of the list is the popular success of Top Gun Maverick, the follow-up, which was a monster at the box office over the past 4 years, which speaks to your Gen X, right? Because
those are my people.
That's when it came out, like the first one kind of came out in that era. Yeah. Probably you were, I'm not sure exactly when it came out, probably when you were in high school, first Top Gun?
Yeah, 88, 89. I would have been in high school, yeah.
Perfect. Exactly a Gen X movie. And so for that to come out again, the second time, I mean, it did massive numbers. It did $124 million in the first weekend that it dropped, but it went exactly opposite of all things DEI in the movie. Yeah. It presented a hero. It presented a man that was presented as a hero, which you can't find in any hero movies today.
No, they're all gone because they've DEI'd themselves right out the back door. And it's, so that's even like when I think about the subconscious messages that have been out there, by the time you guys were kids in the 90s, Full House was a thing.
Oh yeah.
It's three guys in the movie, but you wouldn't necessarily say any of them are out there being masculine, heroes or,
Right.
And so it's subconsciously under this undertow that And it's like what always happens in culture, which is we see this problem and the culture is like, well, we're going to solve it our way, not God's way. So DEI is a great example. Do we want diversity? Yeah, God said every nation, tribe, and tongue. Do we want equity? Yeah, God's, the government will be on his shoulders. We want to, but when it's from the world's perspective, it's diversity means literally identifying you now by a group and not by, which is why it blew up in their face when they realized black males were voting not according to what they thought, because they're not a group. They're all black males don't think the same. Equity in the world's eyes is not equality with each other, it's equality with God, because now I'm going to decide what is right and what is wrong. Those are the exact opposite of the solution for the problem with it. And the idea were there females in the world that had been oppressed. Yeah, the first wave of feminism, I think 1890, I want to say, was when first wave started. It brought women's right to vote. Women. That's why, like Saudi Arabia, when women were just allowed to drive like 5 years ago, like it's that should have been done years ago. And so, do we want our women to be fighters and to be, to have equality, equal rights with? Yeah, that's exactly what. But that's not what feminism did. Feminism was the only solution to this is to emasculate men. Is the way that we're going to solve the problem with this, as opposed to calling us to the biblical masculinity. They're calling us to complete emasculation.
Yeah, and another point he makes is the mass cultural influence of anti-woke comedians, guys like Tony Hinchcliffe, which was all over the news the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Also, Theo Von, Joe Rogan, Shane Gillis, and these are absolutely, they're not Christians.
No,
their whole premise is based on addressing and calling out all things wokeism.
Yeah, and the reason they're doing it is because maybe one of the most core beliefs about wokeism is that if it remotely offends you, then it can't be wrong. You can't say it. And the comedy is 100% about offending people. There's almost not a single joke on the planet that someone is not the butt of. And so these guys have been out there telling the stories, and we saw that in the COVID days. It was the comedians that started to lead, the Dave Chappelles of the world, of it, and which is another reason why I say with churches, like I would say to the future, what we've got to be worried about right now, or not, we got to be very aware of, is Dave Chappelle might, maybe not Dave, Joe Rogan might have voted the way we voted, right? But he is not motivated the way we're motivated.
That's good.
So we can't let him disciple our kids either.
Right.
With it. And then in the middle of all that, you mentioned this morning, and this is how Creed saved America. Creed making a comeback.
One of his points on here, besides a few other things, of which are that major corporations are cutting DEI programs. Like you're seeing that. There's a wave of that happening. They're backtracking. The enrollment surge of K through 12 Christian schools is off the charts. The amount of brand new launched homeschool tutorials in this county alone.
Oh, it went from being a back corner. I mean, we've always supported homeschooling in our church family. We've allowed our church to be used for homeschool tutorials. We encourage it, to those who can. We don't judge.
It used to be maybe 2 or 3 in the community.
Yeah.
There's probably 30 plus.
Yeah, it's become so normal now. And I'm going to say this because I know we have a lot of homeschool moms that are, can I encourage you, go for it, homeschool your kids, but do not judge other moms whose kids are in public school. There's a variety, there's thousands of reasons why, right?
Sure,
so
absolutely.
Don't, and I say that because I was just talking to someone on our staff yesterday whose kids are in public school, and she said, I feel so judged. Now whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I can see it. I mean, I get judged by homeschool moms. I mean, that Halloween thing, right? It was homeschool moms came after us because they thought we were having a Halloween thing, which we were not having a Halloween thing at our church. But the homeschool mom thing is awesome. We love it that you're doing that, but just be kind to other moms who don't have that capability or who cannot afford a Christian school.
One of his last points in this little observation that he put together was just showing that the resurgence of Creed is part of a cultural shift that's happening, and it speaks to the Gen X and into the millennials.
Yeah. So my writing what he's really saying is that these are the fruit of a movement that was already going on, and so Creed is like, okay, it's not that Creed rescued masculinity. It's that masculinity is on the rise, and Creed is, masculine group. Is that butt rock? Is that what we're saying? That Creed?
Yeah. Well, they're just saying, that they were hugely popular in the early 2000s. Like 98 to 2002 was peak Creed.
Yeah.
Okay. And that those people have grown up now and are active members of society, voting members of society.
Yeah.
Leading jobs, leading companies, employing jobs. Their children, there's a good chance they have kids that are maybe in college now.
Oh gosh, that's a weird thought.
And so, in that Creed put together a comeback tour.
Yeah. Is that the one? Is Three Doors Down opening on that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it exploded. There's one of the largest tours in the country, selling out arenas again. That's
remarkable.
And it's just speaking to the fact that generation is alive and well and has spending dollars and has a voice.
Yeah.
So that and it showed up in the voting results, right? So that core demo of fan and music represented by them voted the most.
Yeah. And the coastal political elites that were driving Harris's campaign would have had no idea that was happening under their feet.
No.
I have Creed is close to my heart because so in my days of Christian music, going back to the 90s and the early 2000s, when people, say, hey, I didn't really share this with everybody, but this was the secret to the sauce, is you would find a group that was blowing up in the general market or a genre of music that was blowing up.
Yep.
And then find a act that had a gospel message that had a style that matched that. And it was built on pretty bad theology, which was all secular music was evil, so you have to listen to a Christian version of it, which is why we had some really bad, terrible, Christian bands in the 90s, because it was just, we're just trying to find, in fact, one of the things, if someone told me that they wanted to be a Christian version of Coldplay, the meeting was over.
Yeah.
I had no interest in that. I signed a band that did well called Cutlass, and they were a Christian version of Creed. The joke behind the scenes was Creedless. When we opened for Mercy Me and Audio Adrenaline, I don't know if Schweitzer even listens to this, but he may remember that at the end of that tour, which was a massive tour, they gave us gifts, give out gifts at the end of the tour, and our gift was T-shirts printed with Creedless on it.
Sounded so much like Creed, man, when it came out.
Yeah. But, it's funny, when I first met with the guys, they didn't want to be that. They wanted to be rock, and I remember telling him one time, okay, that's great. You can do that, but you also want to make a living. And here was the secret to things like a band like Creed. The guys loved them and they bring their girlfriends to them.
Right.
And so I remember, I'll never forget the phone call, because my exact words were, if you guys want to play rock shows for girls wearing, with dark fishnet stockings and black everything, you can do that. There's just not that many of them out there. But if you can tap into the male market, they'll bring their girlfriends with them. So you've just doubled your market. Yes. And I remember, I want to say it was James Mead calling that night going, Darren, dude, it was Dallas. It was sold out. And he goes, oh yeah, dude, there's girls here, and good looking ones.
That's funny.
Good looking girls here. But it was, in those days, you were young enough where you were, I think by that time, maybe working in the music world, but the amount of Christian bands back then that were tripping over themselves to try to be in the general market, not talk about Jesus. We didn't want to offend anybody. It was like the end zone was wide open. Like somebody left the end zone open, and these Cutlass boys, of all the things they, were working on getting better at, they still wanted to sing about Jesus. They wanted to be in the general market, but they wanted to sing about Jesus in the general market. And I'm saying that's not going to work. If you want to sing about Jesus, our thing was your kid tested, mother approved. It was the band that kids loved and their moms weren't scared of.
Right.
And we just ran down that end zone for it. But that makes me wonder if we should call Johnny Mac and James and the boys and get the band back together and go out and do the Christian version of a reunion tour. But
I just want to believe that we are seeing a cultural shift. After the past, it really started with Obama, and I'm racking my brain to figure out the podcast that I just listened to recently that explained the almost year by year breakdown of how the DEI was inserted into the federal government, and those policies and how they've played out over the past 14 years. And I need to think of it because it was so educational. But this cultural shift is happening, is potentially very exciting. Somebody was posting pictures on the X machine showing that Target advertising in store is using Merry Christmas and not Happy Holidays this year. I'm so tempted. I haven't walked into a Target in 4 years. I'm so tempted to walk in and see if that's true.
Yeah, I haven't.
And that there's this, and that Walmart's doing the same apparently.
Yeah.
That they're shifting the language back to traditional, traditional language.
As I think about that, and I don't want to be the one peeing in the Cheerios, but it's kind of my job sometimes, there is a cultural shift that actually makes me happy. Like I'm like, oh, that's the cultural shift is a good thing. But a cultural shift based on Christian values without Christ is just a pendulum swing in another direction, and it ends poorly as well. What we need is Christians influencing the culture, but not letting the culture, now we can rest on our laurels, because what's happening, I think what we're seeing is that guys like Rogan, because corporations are about what they're supposed to be about, money.
Making money.
If DEI was making them money, they would be DEIing it. If they, but if conservative values are going to make them money, they'll switch to it. So that's not a bad thing. Let's be okay with that.
Sure.
But what is still needed are Christian voices. What got us where we are right now were Christians saying, we're going to be about this thing that's church and, on Sundays, and not put ourselves in positions to make decisions, not put ourselves in positions in school boards, in town councils and mayors. And we need that. There's not a time to rest.
Yeah. Strike while the iron is hot. I can't think of a time in recent, it's been 14 years, probably 16 years when the iron hasn't been this hot to strike.
Yeah. Think about even just a few years ago when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and we celebrated it here, and people were mad that Christians were celebrating Roe v. Wade. We want to be great. We want to win graciously, or we don't want to, this. I'm like, well, and I was gobsmacked at that. But the culture has shifted so much even in that we called it making hay while the sun is still shining, right? The sun goes down, you can't make hay anymore because you need sun to dry the hay. The sun is shining right now. Let's make hay. So if you are in media, like our buddy Andy is about to release a movie, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, and Lionsgate, a fully secular woke organization, is releasing it with enthusiasm because they believe they can make money on it. Go see that movie. Go, I'm not a Christmas guy. I'll probably just buy, actually my wife will go, so I'll have to go. But when we support those things, that's one way, right? And to make sure that Christian values are in the middle of it. If you are in a corporation, lead like you are a Christian in that corporation. That's another way. You're going to take some hits for it. Our friend Dave Ramsey take hits all the time because they've had Christian values in their company. And the bitter Twitter misery circle that's online, whines and gripes about, his toxic masculinity, whatever nonsense. But it's a Christian company. People love working there. So be a Christian in your organization. And can't stress this enough. If you've even remotely ever thought about putting yourself out there for the school board, putting yourself out there for town council, we learned in COVID, and it's still true today, national politics is important, local politics, state politics. We have a governor here in Tennessee. His term is going to be up at the end of this. It's his last term. I would love another born again, spirit filled woman leading our state. Like that's, Jeremiah 29:11 was, hey, we live in Babylon here. I know the plans for you, the future, which I know that sounds great. And we love quoting that, not talking about what most of us think it's talking about. It was literally talking to Israel, who was discouraged in Babylon, that whole, the psalm, there on the shores, of the river, we sat and we wept of the rivers of Babylon, because they'd lost everything. But eventually he's saying, okay, get up, brush off your feet, go back into town and work for the prospering of the people, because God's ways will not only flourish for you as a Christian, the whole nation will flourish based upon Christian principles.
Is this you putting your hat in the ring for governor of Tennessee?
No, but I will say that Joel Kelly had a dream the other night, which I thought felt more like a nightmare to me. But he said that he dreamed that I won the presidency, and did you hear this? And that he was vice president.
Yeah, which my immediate follow up was, where was I?
Yeah, well, it was his dream, right? Yeah.
I was like, where was I in this?
My favorite part of that, this is Joel Kelly 101 right here. In his dream, even, he's memorizing the Constitution. Like, that's what he thought the first thing he needed to do as vice president. His first act as vice president was to memorize the Constitution.
I think he just had some bad Taco Bell the night before.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah. That's not me throwing my hat in the ring for anything right now. If I will say this, if God led that way,
sure,
I'd do it.
Yeah.
I don't feel it right now. I feel like right now I'm right where I'm supposed to be. But now that you say that out loud, I'm having honestly a little bit of triggering, because I ran my mouth for a long time about churches, and then God's like, yeah, put your money where your mouth is, sucker.
Yeah.
Go be a pastor. If you think you could do it so much better, go do it. Conduit Church was born. So I'm hoping that is not in my it's not on my radar.
Right. I mean, you started off this podcast by getting pretty fired up and getting ready to take somebody back behind the woodshed. I can only imagine how quickly your buttons would be pushed in an environment like that, where you would want to take somebody back, meet at the bike rack at 3 o'clock. We're gonna throw fists. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the scrappiness of me.
You have to dial back your Nebraska.
One of the covers, I guess I could say it out loud. Yeah, I'll say it out loud. It's going to sound like I'm name dropping, but I remember when COVID when all this stuff was first happening, and Dave Ramsey, it was just me, Dave, and Michael Easley sitting in a room. It was in his bat cave at his house. And he's like, Tyler, are you a hillbilly? Because you're a fighter. And no one had ever said that to me before. And he meant it as a compliment, calling me a hillbilly, because he's a hillbilly.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I realized I'm actually not a hillbilly. I'm just white trash. It's just, which is a hillbilly without the romance of it. We fight, we scrap, but I don't know. Maybe someday my wife would have to. I'll tell you this much: the Holy Spirit would have to hover over my wife. Like an immaculate political conception would have to happen in our house for that to go down.
Yeah. This Sunday, what's on tap?
Well, because we're poking dragons. Biblical feminism.
Oh, baby. From biblical masculinity.
I'm sorry. We may have to just edit that. I don't want that clip everyone viral. Biblical femininity.
Okay, so from biblical masculinity. First week. This week, we're going to tackle biblical femininity.
Yeah, because you can't have a family, fight for our families, without a male that knows what the biblical role of masculinity is, and you can't without the biblical role of what femininity is. And your cliffhanger moment is part of it we see in the fact that Eve did not get her name until after the fall. She was called woman. In Genesis 2, Adam says, I will call her woman. And then after the fall, after the curse, and then Adam named his wife Eve. And there is a picture in that of what biblical femininity is. And it's important because the culture has said what femininity is, Barbie and those things, and the Barbie movie, feminism. And by the way, early Barbie, right, that was also not biblical feminism. So again, the world was trying to solve a problem that was created by the world, but they're trying to solve a spiritual problem with a world solution, and that's a spiritual problem, and it requires a spiritual solution. And so I'm going to share what the word woman means, which, spoiler alert again, it's a warrior phrase. It's used 20 times in the Old Testament, 20 times in reference to God, 16 times in reference to going to war. The word that was used for woman, the helper, the helpmate, I'm sorry, sorry, get it right. The word for helpmate, helper, that word, Ezar, E-Z-A-R, was used as a phrase for God. He is our Ezar, and it was 16 times used as a warrior going into war. And I go back to those early days of COVID. It was the moms that were going to war on that stuff. There were guys, no question there were guys. But it was just as many women as there were men. And we need women to rise up, not to try to get in, the Avengers or whatever, but to be who God called them to be.
It's good. A lot to discuss this week. If you missed Sunday's teaching, you can always go back on our YouTube channel or this podcast that you're listening to and catch up from the previous week's teaching. And so we're just grateful that you would join us here on the Conduit Deeper podcast. If you want any more information, if this is your first time stumbling upon this, go check it out, ConduitChurch.com, and we'll be here again next week.